Sacred heart, the soul enchanted sings. Blessed are we on this praising shore, blissfully gleaning pearls of lore. Pilgrims on these pastures green, seeking joy, hinterlands unseen. Sacred hearts, a part of light, shine on bright.
Kindly be seated. Good morning again. In a world where numbers often dictate narratives, understanding the story behind the statistics is crucial. Today, we have the privilege of exploring the intricate dynamics of our economy with someone who has not only studied its patterns, but also challenged its blind spots. Our guest this morning is Dr. Arun Kumar, a scholar whose work has redefined how we view economics in India. A former professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, Dr. Kumar has spent decades dissecting the undercurrents of India's economic framework, bringing to light hidden truth through his seminal research on the black economy. His writings, such as The Black Economy in India, have become essential reading for anyone seeking to decode the complexities of economic justice and governance. But what makes Dr. Arun Kumar truly remarkable is not just his academic rigor, it's his ability to weave these complex ideas into narratives that resonates with policymakers, students, everyday citizens alike. Today, we invite him to look beyond the obvious and question the structures we often take for granted.
This event has been instituted in the name of Saint Chavara Kuriakose Elias, whose name is indelibly marked in the annals of the history of Kerala, not only for the profound contributions he has made to the Catholic Church of Kerala, but also for the many revolutionary reforms he has initiated towards the social and cultural renaissance of the state. A spiritual alchemist, founder of various congregations, and one of the early social entrepreneurs in the state. Saint Chavara is the founder of the CMI congregation, and among the many CMI educational institutions spread all over the country, Sacred Heart College, Chavara enjoys a peerless pride of place. Saint Chavara's exemplary role in the nascent phase of Kerala Renaissance is yet to be duly researched, recognized, and commemorated as an abiding model for future generations, and that is what the Sacred Heart community is committed to.
We would like to mark this occasion with a meaningful gesture, a symbol of growth, care, and sustainability. Watering a plant represents nurturing new beginnings.
We now invite Dr. Arun Kumar to water the plant and set the tone for a fruitful event.
We ask the dignitaries to join as well. To officially welcome the gathering, we invite our principal, Dr. C.S. Biju.
A very warm good morning to one and all. I'm actually so proud to introduce and welcome a luminary in the economic history of economic theory in India. As everybody is aware, Chavara Excellence for Social Transformation lecture series has a phenomenal role in defining the strategies of social transformation of Sacred Heart College, especially for the last 10 years. This is the 10th lecture. And a number of renowned intellectuals and academics came to deliver lectures in this lecture series, beginning with Dr. Manmohan Singh. First of all, I would like to welcome our beloved manager, Reverend Dr. Varghese Kachapalli, to this occasion and for his blessings. Warm welcome, Father Varghese Kachapalli. Our dignitary today, Dr. Arun Kumar, has been working in the Institute of Public Policy and in Jawaharlal Nehru University for many decades. Before that, it's quite interesting to know that he was trained as a physicist. He has an MS in physics from Princeton University and switched in an amazing way to economics. And his works, especially on inflation and its impact on trade, and the black economies of India, which is a very, very renowned coinage by Dr. Arun Kumar, Professor Arun Kumar, which has been published many volumes. And he is, unlike the mainstream economists in India, Professor Arun Kumar is a pathfinder in defining an entirely different domain of the practice of finance and trade, at the same time in interpreting the economic history of India. Especially the work Understanding Black Economy and Black Money in India is another phenomenal work by him. I'm so happy to welcome this. I'm also very privileged to have our head of the department, Dr. Sibi Abraham, to introduce our speaker today. Welcome, Dr. Sibi. Dr. Leslie Augustine, the staff secretary, will deliver the vote of thanks. I welcome Dr. Leslie to this auspicious occasion. Together with that, we have a number of renowned former faculty and former faculty of Sacred Heart College. And I welcome Father Jason, Reverend Father Jason, Principal, Rajagiri College, for his kind presence here. We have our vice principals, Reverend Dr. Joseph George, Father Joseph George, and Dr. C.S. Francis. Eminent retired faculty from various departments and alumni, and our dear students. I welcome all in a single note of welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for those warm words of welcome. On our behalf, we also invite the principal to this lecture. We now invite Father Manager to deliver the presidential address.
Respected Speaker of the Day, Dr. Arun Kumar, retired Professor of Economics, JNU University. Respected Dr. C.S. Biju, the Principal, SH College, Chavara. Reverend Dr. Jason Molavirikal, Principal, Rajagiri Engineering College. Dr. C.B. Abraham, HOD, Department of Economics. Dr. Leslie Augustine, Staff Secretary. Invited guests, staff and students of SH College. Warm good morning to everyone. The lecture series, Chavara, Excellence for Social Formation, is an important platform to share and discuss valuable insights for social transformation, inspired of the life of Saint Chavara, who lived in the 18th century. Saint Chavara Kuriakos Elias was one of the founding fathers of the Congregation of Carmelites of Mary Immaculate, CMI. And Sacred Heart College is one of the education institutions which continue the legacy of the forefathers of the congregation. Spiritual elements and zealous activeness. We can inspire people even with our simple presence. But transforming a society which was totally chaotic by social evils, which was brutally treating the human aspects, is not easy. But Saint Chavara was a man who has initiated all that can do to transform the society. And education for all was the main tool that Saint Chavara brought in practice to make the transformation of the society possible. And now we continue to participate in the vision of the great spiritual legend. Recently, I read a book named The 8 Paradoxes of Great Leaderships. There, as the first paradox that was given was great leaders balance both confidence and humility. Saint Chavara's life is a challenging life even today to balance confidence and humility in our workplace. His confidence was God's grace. His humility was trusting God. So to transform a person or a society, we need both confidence and humility. When we take to initiate to make changes, we need to have confidence as well as humility to interact with the people. Recently, I was just thinking, early morning we listen to the melodious, soothing voice of cuckoo, and then we enjoy it. But immediately there comes crow, and then crow also sings cra cra cra. Just before cuckoo was singing a melodious song, and then crow can think, why should I make a sound just like this to irritate people? But crow does manifest its own possibility. And it sings. It gels with the nature. Father or Saint Chavara has done in 18th century in his own way, blissful way, and he was leading a blessed life. Thinking that just don't keep us down saying that we cannot do anything now. Even it's just like a sound of crow. Just manifest the possibilities. There will be effects on the nature and the society. And I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Arun Kumar for accepting our invitation to be the speaker of the day. Let us make this day fruitful and blessed. May the Sacred Heart of Jesus bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Manager. We now call upon Dr. Sibi Abraham, Head of the Department of Economics, to introduce today's esteemed speaker.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Arun Kumar, our esteemed keynote speaker of the day. Professor Arun Kumar joined Jawaharlal Nehru University in 1984 and retired in 2015 as the Sukhmoy Chakravarti Chair Professor at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning. In 2000, the Delhi Higher Secondary Board and Delhi University. His areas of specialization include development economics, public finance, and public policy. From 1982 to 1985, he worked at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, where he contributed to the report on the black money in India for the Central Board of Direct Taxes, Government of India. He has held visiting appointments at the University of Italy and the Humboldt and Leipzig universities in Germany. Additionally, he has delivered lectures in Yale University, Columbia University, and Carnegie Mellon University in the US, as well as UNAM in Mexico. For his contributions to development economics, University of Mexico, UNAM, awarded him the Ricardo Prize in Economics. His PhD thesis, which was published in 1982 on inflation and terms of trade, provided a fresh perspective on the role of trade and government in inflation in India. His book, The Black Economy in India, has been groundbreaking in reshaping discussions on the Indian economy. He also edited the book Challenges Facing Indian Universities and has written extensively on issues related to higher education in India. He has published several notable works, including Indian Economy Since Independence, Persisting Colonial Disruption, Understanding Black Economy and Black Money in India, an inquiry into causes, consequences, and remedies, which was published in 2017. Another one, Demonetization and Black Economy, in the same year, 2017. Then, Ground Scorching Tax, Analyzing GST, published in 2019. And Indian Economy's Greatest Crisis, Impact of the Coronavirus and the Road Ahead, in December 2020. The last three books were published by Penguin Random House. He has written extensively on globalization, development, and public policy, contributing to both academic journals and the popular press, and has been actively involved in public policy discussions since 1980. In 1989, he served as the vice chair of the Manifesto Drafting Committee for the National Front, and in 2013, he was the convener of the Economics and Ecology Committee of the Aam Aadmi Party. He authored the alternative budgets for 1993-94 and 94-95, which proposed alternative economic policies for the country. These were presented to Citizens' Assembly comprising eminent citizens. He was also part of a group that produced an alternative economic survey for 2 decades, offering an alternative analysis of the official data. He served as a group leader of the Indo-Russian Committee for the pricing of Sukhoi 30 multi-role fighter aircraft and was a member of the first pay commission of the Tibetan government in exile. Throughout his career, he has actively participated in various social movements, including those advocating for housing rights. It is indeed a great honor to have you with us today. Without further delay, I now invite you to deliver the keynote address. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Arun Kumar to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me to this distinguished gathering to present this talk. As was already said, I was the chairman of a commission on employment and unemployment in 2022, set up by the Gandhian and Sarvodaya groups. So my talk will be based largely on that and on the unorganized sector, on which I had recently published a paper. So to begin, the title of the talk is Unemployment in India, an Invisibilization of the Unorganized Sector. I argue that the unorganized sector, which employs 94% of the workforce, has been invisibilized both CPE by the UGC belongs to the nationwide network of educational institutions under the Carmelite of Mary Immaculate. I'd like to thank Dr. Thomas Chattamparabil, CMI, for the invitation and Father Joseph for facilitating my visit. The talk is held in honor of Saint Chavara, 1805 to 1871, the founder of CMI and one of the most renowned persons of India hailing from Kerala. He was declared a saint by the Catholic Church in 2014. He was a prominent social reformer who set up a press leading to the first newspaper in Kerala, opened schools to cater to different linguistic groups, and worked for empowerment and uplift of women. He was clearly with the marginalized people around him. His work, almost 2 centuries back, has inspired later generations to follow in his footsteps. Today, he would have been concerned with the plight of the unemployed and the marginalized. If he was around, he would certainly have been a leader of this. Now, as an introduction, when society faces a problem and is unable to resolve it, it implies that something basic is wrong and one needs to rectify it. To do so, we need to identify its causes. If we don't have the cause of something, we can't rectify it. Or if the cause is incorrect, then the solution would also be incorrect. So identifying the cause is very important. Now, these causes may lie in the system that has evolved over time and which conditions the dominant social and political thinking in society. Because the social and political thinking that enables us to actually resolve a problem. The onus of finding the solution and rectifying the problem is on the rulers and not the marginalized, because the marginalized are not the policy makers. So the rulers have to do that. The failure of the rulers to do so over time implies a lack of motivation / commitment to solving the problem. All this applies to the issue of employment generation and growing unemployment in India, which affects the vast majority of the citizens. As I said, 94% are in the unorganized sector, and they are the ones who face the problem of unemployment. Anybody who's unemployed actually shifts to the unorganized sector. The problem which affects the youth, women, and all the marginalized sections is growing. As the data shows, unemployment has become a greater and greater problem, and the impact is on the social, political, and economic strife and instability in the nation. So the nation gets more and more unstable as this problem aggravates. This problem is likely to aggravate further with increasing use of AI and related technologies, and the climate change being brought about by environmental degradation. So climate change is affecting our agriculture, and that's going to create a problem. And artificial intelligence is creating a problem. As you know, Hariri and earlier, Kurzweil, they have already said that AI will capture not only this world, but the entire universe. And therefore, the problems will aggravate. These two problems are rapidly changing all the parameters of societal existence. We are not even dealing with this, the change in the parameters of societal existence. We appear unconcerned, just as we have been unconcerned about tackling unemployment. And as some of the writers have been writing, we may have only a few years to realize the kind of impact that AI will have. Because AI is creating a super intelligence. This super intelligence will capture not only the Earth, but the entire universe. That's what Kurzweil had written in 2005 in his book called Singularity is Near. Now he's got a book recently, 3 years back, Singularity is Here. Why singularity? Because the change is exponential. And not only is the change exponential, those who know mathematics, the exponent is also changing exponentially. So it's a super change that is taking place. And if that is the case, we need to be moving quickly before we get taken over by a super intelligence that is being created. Hariri is here in India these days, and he's been giving talks and so on, and he's been mentioning this as a fact, that we are not even knowing where we are headed as a result of this super intelligence that is being created. And this super intelligence can lie. So it's like a brain, you know. ChatGPT 4 used to make mistakes, but now with Strawberry in ChatGPT 5, it'll self-correct. So it'll function like a brain and therefore create new knowledge. So ChatGPT has already absorbed all the digital knowledge that there was. ChatGPT 5 will create new knowledge, what we haven't created, and therefore it will go ahead of us. So these dangers, and ChatGPT 5 is just a few months away. ChatGPT 4 came in November 2022. So you can see that within 2 years, this big change has come. When ChatGPT 6 and 7 come, the change will be even greater. So in other words, there's a huge challenge before us that's going to come, and probably 90% of the population will become unemployed as a result. Very few, those who are in software development, those who are dealing with this ChatGPT, etc., only they will be the ones employed. Work of doctors, lawyers, engineers, that will go. Teachers, will also go. So in other words, this huge challenge that's coming will create massive unemployment, and we are not even thinking about it today. Now, to get back to the current situation, unemployment is not natural or inevitable or irresolvable, but it's a result of the economic system. Very often it's said there has to be unemployment. No, unemployment is the result of the economic system that we have. So it's a product of the development paradigm. And it also reflects what is our view of human beings. Do we tolerate unemployment? Do we say that it's natural? Do we say that the human beings require employment and therefore we must have employment? So it's a vision that we have of our society. Today, controversies surround India's growth performance, especially since 2015. Officially, it is claimed that the economy is the fastest growing large economy. Yet the government is giving 5 kilograms of grains per month per person free to 81 crore Indians. 81 crore Indians are 58% of the population. Since it believes they are unable to buy enough food, it is an admission that growth has not resolved the issue of poverty in India. If it had, then we would not have had to give free grains. Persistence of poverty is linked to the prevalence of high level of unemployment in India. And if growth is robust, the question is, why is unemployment high? So if there is good growth, unemployment should not be there. If the growth is less, that's when the unemployment would become a problem. So could it be that the official growth and poverty data are incorrect? Data from various sources shows that income and wealth disparity in India is increasing. And I quote the Oxfam report of 2023, which tells us the kind of inequality that is there and how it's increasing. The implication is that whatever growth is occurring, it is concentrated in the hands of a few percent of the population. A few percent are gaining, the rest are not gaining out of it, or gaining very little. This is the K-shaped growth that people are talking about. One segment is growing, the other segment is declining. Okay? And what better evidence than what we saw in the pandemic? During the pandemic, large number of people went from cities to the rural areas under very trying conditions. There was heat, there's lack of food, there's lack of water, and yet people are willing to walk hundreds of kilometers back to their villages because they had no work in the cities, they had no incomes to sustain themselves in the cities. So that shows the kind of distress that people had migrated because of distress from rural to urban areas, but they had no savings. 84%, according to Azim Premji's study, 84% of the people surveyed, the workers surveyed, they said they don't have enough savings even to buy 1 week of ration. So how could they survive without work? That shows the kind of destitution that prevails, the kind of poverty that prevails in India, that people are unable to face a crisis even for 1 week. So this is the situation that we have where this K-shaped growth is actually impacting the unorganized sector. So the next section is what are the basic issues? So the basic issues that are involved are, Gandhi said India is the only country capable of giving a civilizational alternative. This was India of my dreams and in the Hind Swaraj. The two, Hind Swaraj is a very thin book which everybody should read. That's like the manifesto of Gandhi. You know, it's just 80 pages written originally in 28 days on the ship going from England to South Africa. He had gone to England and when he went back. It was written in Gujarati, but it's translated into all languages. Okay, time has come to take seriously this civilizational alternative idea. Since unemployment has become a critical issue, unemployment is a multi-dimensional issue since it's a result of multiple causes and has widespread implications. It impacts growth of the economy, inequality, poverty, etc. It has gender dimension and impacts the marginalized sections adversely, reflecting a lack of social justice. It is entrenched among the youth. It is shown in our report, this report that we brought out last year, and we have shown there in this report in 2022, that in 2022, 24.2 million young people potentially could enter the labor force. That means we needed to provide work for 24.2 million young people. But officials have been talking about only 6 to 8 million work. In other words, 22.4 million are going to come in, but only they're talking about creating 6 to 8 million work. In other words, there'll be large-scale unemployment. And even this 6 to 8 million jobs is not being provided. The organized sector, where the desirable jobs are, hardly creates 500,000 to 1 million jobs. So therefore, 22.4 million are required, but the desirable organized sector is creating only 500,000 to 1 million jobs. So in other words, everybody else has to go into the unorganized sector. That is the importance of the unorganized sector. And that's why I'm talking about the unorganized sector a lot. Okay. So unemployment has political and social ramifications, like on social conflict. It leads to greater social conflict because everybody wants to get into the organized sector and especially into the public sector. And therefore, there's a challenge of reservation. Even the well-off communities like the Marathas in Maharashtra, they want reservation. Meenas in Rajasthan have reservation. So everybody wants reservation, even though reservation is not a solution to the problem. But at least a few 100,000 jobs, So this is the challenge. Communities are fighting over reservation. Then, family relations are getting spoiled. Because when people are unemployed, the family is in a crisis. And I'll come back to this question a little later. Politics is in a crisis because politics is being fought on this conflict. So social, political, and economic instabilities rule in the country. The rapidly growing income of the top 1% in the income ladder. And as I mentioned, Oxfam study says 22.6% is the earning of 1%. Okay? So that's the kind of extreme inequality. But this does not include the black incomes. If you include the black incomes, and most of the black incomes are earned by the top 1%, then the top 1% is earning 40% of the incomes. And the bottom 50% is only earning 5% of the incomes. So that is the kind of extreme inequality you have. And the wealth inequality is even greater. So wealth inequality and income inequality are growing. So it indicates that the economy has the resources, but they are mal-distributed. So it's a distribution that's the problem. So it's not that the economy doesn't have resources. Resources are there, but they are mal-distributed. The rich have created a system that enables them to capture most of the gains from development with little trickling down to the marginalized sections. If any social challenge persists over a long period, as unemployment in India has, its origins lies in society's perceptions and priorities. So we have to worry about what are the perceptions which enable such inequality to be tolerated and allow it to increase. In India, these can be traced to the adoption of state capitalism and persisting feudal tendencies. So our society is still very feudal in its thinking. And that's why we are not concerned about the marginalized sections. So feudal thought is prevailing all over the country, all over the institutions, and so on. So India has been experiencing one-way globalization. You see, Buddhism went from India up to Japan. You know, Bali is a Hindu island. We traded with East Africa a couple of thousand years back. So that's globalization. But according to writers like Paul Kennedy, from 1750, this globalization becomes one-way globalization. Two-way globalization means exchange of ideas, exchange of technology, exchange of capital, okay, trade. One-way globalization means all influences are coming from one side. They're not two-way. So India has entered this phase of one-way globalization since 1750. And after 1991, it has taken the form of marketization. So there are different phases of one-way globalization. Even in 1947 with independence, we were still in the one-way globalization phase. But from 1991, this one-way globalization takes on what I call marketization. And we need to understand what is this marketization. It promotes profit maximization even at the expense of human suffering. How is it legitimate to keep workers unemployed, which leads to loss of output and a smaller size of the economy and lower level of profits? So this one-way globalization, which is based on profit maximization, doesn't think that we must maximize the output. If there's unemployment, then a certain amount of output is lost. So it's not therefore optimum. So the logic of individual rationality, the system should create productive employment for all, but it does not. So profit maximization should try and maximize employment, but it doesn't do that. Why? Markets have always existed. What is a market? A market is an institution of exchange. I go to the shop, I pay money, and I get something. In barter, I produce shoes, somebody produces wheat, I give him shoes, and he gives me wheat. So that's exchange. So even barter is a market. Okay? So markets have always existed, but marketization is new. What is marketization? It implies the penetration of the market principles into day-to-day institutions of existence. So all institutions of existence now operate according to the principles of market, which wasn't the case earlier. Thank you. So things that were not in the market, like air, like water, like coastal regions, they've all got marketized. So institutions have been affected by this. So this is the thing, that marketization is not new. Marketization is new, which implies the penetration of market principles into all social institutions, and that has led to basic philosophical changes. So society's philosophical aspects have changed as a result of marketization. And therefore, what has happened is there is promotion of unchecked materialism. There was always materialism, but there's a balance between the spiritual and the material. Now it's all in one direction, all based on materialistic progress as we define it. So marketization is determining society's choices. For instance, one of the principles, Samuelson's basic economics books, first principle is dollar vote. If you have $1 million, you have 1 million votes. I have $1, I have 1 vote. So the principle dollar vote is not based on the democratic principle of one person, one vote. If one person has 1 million votes, in the market, they determine the choices. Okay? So as a result, the policymakers accept it and prioritize the choice of the well-off over those of the marginalized. So what the well-off desire. So if I want to buy a Mercedes-Benz, I'm allowed. You don't have money to buy food, that's allowed. So no distinction is made. Okay? So dollar vote means it is undemocratic. It makes society undemocratic. So even though we talk of democracy, but when we go for dollar vote, it becomes undemocratic. The well-off dictate the social judgments of society. Consequently, now equality is not on the agenda. So there's no equality between people. Not only is there no equality, even equity is not a concern. So forget equality, equity is also not a concern today. Marketization strips off the social aspects from life, turning individuals into automatons. So marketization has taken away history politics, sociology. Only economics matters. We are homo economicus. So if we are homo economicus, then there's no history. So models of economics have become ahistorical. There's no politics. There's no sociology. So we are automatons. Individual distress and situation in life is now not society's concern. Unemployment is like switching off a machine. When somebody becomes unemployed, the wife may have to go out and work and have a double burden. The children may not be able to go to school, but that is not the concern of the market. So market is unconcerned with this. So no social concern need to be attached to unemployment. In fact, businesses welcome unemployment because for them, it's an efficient device to discipline labor. If there's unemployment, people will not protest. Labor will not protest. And neoclassical economics calls this natural. There's something called the natural rate of unemployment. Okay? So that natural rate of unemployment is given as a part of this. Even though it's not natural, as I said earlier, but that's what economic theory, the new economic theory, that's what it suggests. So the market notion of efficiency is status quoist. That is, it perpetuates the historical social injustice. Status quoist means whatever be your endowment, that is accepted. There's no need to redistribute it. So therefore, you accept whatever exists. So whatever historically has been there, whatever injustice has been there, you carry on with it. Another of its principles is called consumer sovereignty. It implies that individuals should be left free and the collectivity should not intervene in their choices, no matter how socially detrimental they may be. So somebody may be consuming a lot, and that may be detrimental to the environment, but don't intervene. Society should not intervene in that. Okay? So, if I have the money, I can do what I like. The market sees nothing wrong in it. In fact, society has come to celebrate this. More is better is another principle. And that's what promotes consumerism. If I have one shirt, I'm better off with a second shirt. If I have one car, I'm better off with a second car. So therefore, consumerism comes out of that. More is better. Economics defines more is better, which promotes consumerism. And I call this the new opium of the masses. You can always tell people you are better off. You have now big color television sets, you have big cars, etc. You are better off. Okay? And therefore, people are satisfied. So people are chasing after more and more goods rather than looking at what is happening in society. So this is the new opium of the masses. Now, it's not that consumption was not there earlier. But today, consumerism means consumption for the sake of consumption. So fashion industry will say, this winter, yellow will be there, next summer, pink will be there, next summer, blue will be there, and people keep on changing clothes. Even though clothes can last for 10 years, 15 years. Car models can last for 50 years, but every 5 years you'll have a new car model. People will run after buying new cars. Okay? So consumerism means consumption for the sake of consumption. In the US, if you've worn a cloth 5 times, you say, I'm tired now, I'll throw it away. It can last you 15 years. So consumption for the sake of consumption has come. And as a result, greed has always existed. But greed is now raised to a new high pedestal. Greed is celebrated. The more you consume, the better off you are considered. And no judgment needs to be made on it. You know, like earlier when I was a child, people would say, this fellow is earning money the wrong way. So we should not socialize. Now, if you have a big house, a fancy car, you are celebrated and everybody wants to link up with you. Okay? So the social changes are there in perception. If more is better, then sacrifice is stupidity. You should not sacrifice. But family and society is built on sacrifice. When I went to Ukhrul in Manipur, in 1978, there's a plaque saying the Indian National Army came up to that point and they said we have sacrificed our today for nations tomorrow. So nations are built on sacrifice. Society is built on sacrifice. Families are built on sacrifice. But under the new regime of market, sacrifice is stupid. So this changed the perception in society. And everything is to be measured as gains and losses. If everything is to be measured as gains and losses, even in the family, the husband may say, I'm giving more, less I should divorce. Okay? So if you measure gains and losses, divorces will be more. Okay? In the US, when I was there in 76, roughly 50% of the population used to go to some advisor or some counselor. They couldn't cope with life because everybody wanted to gain more. So as a result, divorces are so many that you have a half brother, 1/3 sister, and 1/4 father because the person married 2 times, 3 times, and 4 times. Okay? So family breaks down as a result of this. And if family breaks down, society will also break down. So in other words, marriages are increasingly breaking down and having an impact on society and on our thinking. In essence, whether or not society should aim to give productive employment to all reflects its fundamental vision of individuals. These are the ways in which the fundamental vision of individuals is changing as a result of marketization. Society needs to choose what is more important, profits or welfare of the marginalized majority. The Gandhian view, largely rejected by the Indian elite, was last person first. That was Gandhi's talisman. If you have a dilemma about what policy to follow, look at the last person, what you call antim vyakti. Look at the last person. What the last person needs is what would be the correct policy. And there can be nothing more democratic than that. Because if what the last person needs is what you do, then you'll take care of the entire society. So last person first is the talisman that we got from there. Now, let me switch to the historical context of all this. With independence, the ruling elite decided to quickly copy Western modernity rather than work out an Indian modernity. Gandhi wanted an Indian modernity, but bulk of the Congress party wanted a Western modernity. So the focus became the development of the modern sector. So that's what Western modernity was, to modernize. The urban-centric policymakers called this development. But this sector, which is the organized sector, the modern sector, generates far less employment than India requires to take people out of agriculture and rural areas and out of poverty. Terms of trade at the farm level shifted against the agriculture. So surplus was extracted from agriculture to bring to industry and to urbanization. So millions of tribals, landless, and marginal farmers have been displaced. I read a report that in some cases tribals have been displaced 17 times since independence, because they go to one place, get displaced, go to another place and get displaced. So displacement has been large scale for the marginalized sections. And when they come to the cities, what do? They provide cheap labor to businesses and to people like us. We can have drivers, we can have servants at home, maids and so on at home, because labor is very cheap. My nephew, who's a cardiologist in the US in Philadelphia, he earns a lot of money as a cardiologist. He earns 50 times more than I do, and yet he cannot employ a driver or a maid servant or a full-time servant, because there you have to pay a living wage to them. Okay? So our lifestyle depends on keeping labor very cheap in the. So the acuteness of the problem faced by the marginalized was exposed by the pandemic in 2020, as I said. The elite have viewed their policies since 1991 as successful in reducing poverty. But poverty has changed its form. Poverty is not the same. Poverty is space and time specific. You can't say poverty in Ladakh is the same as poverty in Kerala. In Ladakh, unless you have a good house, you have good food, good clothing, good energy, you'll die in one winter. In Kerala, you can survive with a veshti, living under the thatch with banana. So poverty in Kerala is different from poverty in Ladakh. The kind of people to survive, that's a middle-class existence in the plains. Okay? And poverty in the US is not the same as here. Poverty in 1962 is not the same as poverty today. Technology has changed. You need new things, So a rickshawala carrying a mobile phone doesn't mean he's not poor. Because in today's thing, that may be necessary. Okay? So in other words, as technology changes, the poverty definition changes. So the connection between poverty and inadequacy of work has been known for long. And that is why right to work has been a persisting concern in India. As part of the right to work movement started by Chandrasekhar, the former prime minister, and other socialist leaders in the 1980s. So we've been talking about right to work for a long time because the problem has been increasing. The top-down policies pursued after independence were moderated by the government intervening to help the poor. In 1947, it was realized by the Congress leadership that while going for Western modernity, the basic problems of the individual were not their problem. They were systems problem. A poor person could not set up a school for herself or himself, could not set up a dispensary for herself or himself. It's the system which had to do it. So state was given a large role in 1947. In other words, collectively we have to resolve the problem. So the feature of policies, these policies, was jettisoned and policy was turned on its head. So instead of saying, like in 1947, that the individual is not to blame for her or his problems and collectively we will solve it, in 1991 we said, now the individual is to blame, the collective is not responsible. So therefore it became individualized. That's what marketization is all about, individualization. Collectivity has retreated. So this changed the policy paradigm so that the collective is no more responsible for the individual's problems. Policy became growth at any cost. So you have to grow at any cost. And who bears the cost? The cost is borne by the workers and by the environment. So we haven't cared about the environment. We haven't cared about what poverty and marginalization is. Consequently, at a low level of per capita income, we have some of the most polluted air and rivers. So our consumption level is only 3 or 4% of what it is in the US or in Europe. And yet, our rivers and our cities are the most polluted in the world. And that is because of consumerism of the well-off segments. Unemployment has resulted in the creation of a reserve army of labor, which has weakened labor and forced it to accept a wage much below the living wage. Our constitution promises a living wage to all workers, but we are not able to give a living wage to all workers. This has resulted in distress, and that makes this development paradigm unsustainable, socially, politically, economically, and environmentally. The global economic developments since the end of Second World War in 1945 are crucial. To understand all this, we have to understand the development since 1945, when the Bretton Woods institutions were set up, which meant the IMF, the World Bank, and GATT. These were the institutions that were set up after 1944, the Bretton Woods thing. Not only did the pattern of globalization in the world change as a result of this, the internal dynamics of developing countries got determined by the global interests of big powers. So they have been determining what will happen globally. Policies since the 1980s are based on the idea of market-friendly state intervention. So there's a shift in 1980s as Soviet Union weakened, as China took a 180-degree turn after Mao's death, the policies have changed. Now it is market-friendly. State intervention should be market-friendly. It should promote the market. That is what's marketization. They're not about free markets. So it's not that state should retreat. State should strategically work in favor of the markets. That's the idea. So it's not a free market economy. The World Bank realized that these policies would lead to social explosion. Because the World Bank realized that if we go for market-friendly state intervention and don't protect the poor, then poverty will increase and that will lead to a social explosion. So therefore, the World Bank changed its line in the mid-80s and started talking about safety nets. It said people will become poor, so provide safety nets, otherwise there will be a social explosion. So these safety nets are supposed to be the capitalism with a human face. That was the idea, that we have to present a human face to the world. So this is welfare capitalism of Europe in the 1950s onward period. So this is what is supposed to be the case. But this does not eliminate the demand problem. Demand remains short because the poor people have no purchasing power or very little purchasing power. Further, through twists and turns, politics has taken a further rightward turn globally and discredited globalization. So in today's world, Trump says India has snatched jobs from us, China has snatched jobs, Mexico has snatched jobs, and I'll impose tariff. I'll impose 60% tariff on China, 20% on India, 20% on Mexico and Canada, right? So there's a move towards deglobalization because it's not solving the problems, the basic problems that are there of unemployment. So he blames unemployment in the US on China, India, Mexico, Canada, and so on. Okay? And therefore, he's discrediting globalization, even though globalization has favored the US the most. But within the US, it has favored the elite sections, not the common people. The common people have lost jobs, what is called the Rust Belt in America. The Rust Belt means those segments of manufacturing that were doing well are not doing well, and therefore there's unemployment. So he's using this, and this is a problem of unemployment globally, all over the world. So as a result, to deal with the growing crisis, since around 2015, now the World Bank is saying go for universal basic income, UBI. Okay? Why? Because people don't have purchasing power. If they don't have purchasing power, they cannot buy. If they cannot buy, industry cannot grow much. So give income in the hand of everybody. So in India, give it to Mr. Ambani, Mr. Adani, but also to the poor. Give universal basic income means income in the hand of everybody, so that some purchasing power is there. Okay? This is a departure from the basics of capitalism. Capitalism says, as per Kaletsky, you pay for work done. You don't pay for work not done. And that's why subsidy is frowned. Don't give subsidies. But now, because we cannot solve our basic problem of unemployment and of purchasing power, therefore give money in the hand of everybody, even if they're not working. So in other words, this is the crisis of capitalism. Capitalism has accepted that it cannot generate full employment. That's the basic tenet that's coming out. Now, global financial capital has been looking for a way out of the crisis, but it is not willing to go for the basic changes that could provide a solution. In India, since the mid-1960s, there has been an erosion of economic sovereignty as policies have come increasingly under the sway of global finance capital. So World Bank and IMF levy what are called cross-conditionalities. These cross-conditionalities say how you should run the economy. And that is as per the requirement of global financial capital. That's not as per the requirement of the marginalized segments or the unorganized sector. So the marginalized segments and the unorganized sector becomes a residual in this policy. If they benefit, they benefit. If they don't benefit, they don't benefit. Consequently, the government is increasingly unable to deal with India's basic problem in a more suitable or desirable way. Now, this brings to focus the problems of youth, of education, gender, and regional differences. Four aspects may be noted about unemployment in India. First, unemployment is entrenched among the youth in the age group of 15 to 29. So maximum unemployment is in the age group of 15 to 29. The more educated the person, the higher the chance of being unemployed. That's the second point. Because it's concentrated in the educated youth. And not only concentrated in the educated youth, they're not getting the jobs appropriate to their skill. So you can see engineers and those with very poor degrees in management doing the work of a cleaner or a peon. They haven't got those degrees. You know, in UP there were 360 jobs of peons in 2015, for which 23 lakh people applied, okay? And what you required is a 5th class degree, and 380 PhDs applied, 2 lakh BTech, MTech, BCom applied, okay? So you can imagine, you got all these degrees and you're working as a peon or as a cleaner. And the problem is particularly more for the women. Women have the largest amount of unemployment in the country. So educated youth and women, large numbers do not find commensurate with the degree or the skill. Now I'll skip some of the data because otherwise it'll take a lot of time. The social implication of youth unemployment is that they feel they have failed the family. So there's frustration amongst the youth. Because the family says, we've spent so much money, we've sent you to Kota, we've sent you to so many other institutions, okay? And there's so much money we've spent, and yet you're not getting a job. So as it is, the child is frustrated because not got employment, and that the family is also cursing them that they're not getting proper employment. So as a result, what's happening? A study of Bihar shows that they are getting into drugs and drinking. So youth is on mobile phones, watching memes and so on and so forth, okay? And therefore, that's causing depression. It is well known that if you spend 4 or 5 hours on mobile phones, you'll get depressed over a period of time. And that depression is aggravated by the family situation, okay? And therefore, they're getting into drugs and drinking, but they don't have the money. So there's snatching of money in the family. So violence has entered the family as a result of this. So the social implications of unemployment amongst the educated youth is very high. It's also resulting in suicides. It's also resulting in a lot of people committing illegalities. I used to go to Bhalaswa near Delhi, where there's a huge mountain of refuse. Okay? They're living in very poor conditions. And there the women were complaining that the young people are forming gangs and then they're doing crime. So if they don't have an income source, then they get into criminal activity as well. High unemployment increases conflict for the few good jobs, and there's increasing demand for reservation from various sections. Youth also resents the raising of the retirement age, fearing loss of few available jobs. So the elderly require longer period of work to sustain themselves, but youth feels that jobs are being snatched away from them. So there's a conflict between increasing the retirement age, because our retirement age was set in 1938 at the age of 58, because that time most people used to die by the time they were 35. The longevity is only 35 years. Today longevity is 70 years. So you can work till 75, you can work till 80, but the retirement age is 60. Okay? So people have to sustain themselves over 20 years, whereas earlier in 1930s, most people would have died by the time they were 58, so they didn't have to sustain themselves, so you could give pension. So now the need is to allow people to work till much longer. But youth feels our jobs are going to be snatched away if we increase the retirement age. So there's conflict. Conflict over reservation, conflict over the length of service, and so on and so forth. So in other words, various kinds of conflicts are increasing as a result of unemployment. And education is facing a crisis. What is the crisis? Teaching is unlike an office or a factory job. It requires commitment and originality. It cannot be measured like that in a factory. You can't have time and motion studies. You know, I can give 100 indifferent lectures and bore the students, or I can give one inspired lecture and spark the child, and the child will take off. But largely, our teaching is by rote. We dictate notes, or we write on the blackboard, children mug it up and forget after the exam. Knowledge is built stage by stage. That doesn't happen because the child is not absorbing the knowledge, learning by rote. And therefore, what's happening is that knowledge doesn't get converted into wisdom. So information is there, information doesn't get converted to knowledge, and knowledge doesn't get converted to wisdom. So therefore, we are lacking in this thing. And without absorption of knowledge, there's a damage in the socially relevant knowledge generation. We become copiers of ideas. We are copying ideas from the West. And therefore, I call Indian intellectuals derived intellectuals. We are not original sources of knowledge. We are deriving our knowledge from the West and recycling it in India. So in the 1980s, the World Bank was funding the studies on poverty. And the World Bank was wanting all studies to say market will solve the problem, whereas we know market will not solve the problem. So our studies are being dictated to by forces from outside, you know, the funding agencies. So we have become derived intellectuals. The result is a vicious cycle of indifferent teaching and disinterested students. You may have seen articles by Richard Thane. Richard Thane came as an exchange student between Brown University and St. Stephen's College. When he went back in 2012 to Brown University, he wrote a scathing article. He said, what kind of teaching is going on in St. Stephen's College, one of the best colleges of India? He said, children learn by rote, forget. They don't absorb. And that's the way our exams are conducted. That's the way our teaching is done. Okay? This was published in the Hindu, in the EPW, and so on. Okay? Because that is the nature of our teaching. It doesn't excite the child. It doesn't excite the child to learn. So the teaching is a problem. No wonder general standards of education are poor. You've heard of the ACER reports, Annual Status of Education Report from 2005 onward. These ACER reports show that 50% children in rural schools in the 5th standard cannot do 2nd standard reading, writing, and maths. The latest ACER report in 2024 shows that 40% children in the age group of 14 to 18 cannot do 2nd class reading, writing, and maths. Much more damaging. Okay? Therefore, they drop out, and we produce 50,000 world-class students accidentally, not because of our system, but they're very good, they'll be good, okay? But the system is not producing large number of well-trained people. And that's why businesses complain that most of the students are unemployable because they don't have the skills that are required by businesses and industry. So the crisis in education has led to growing illegality in the field of education with all manner of fraudulent practices, whether it be cheating, etc. The coaching institutions are interested in leaking the question papers so that their students can do well. So leakage of question papers, manipulation of marks, etc. has increased dramatically over the last 25, 30 years. In brief, the crisis in society spills over to the field of education, and in turn that aggravates the societal crisis by preventing a resolution. So we are all in the field of education. We need to be concerned about this. Then low participation of women in labor force weakens their position in the household and in society, since they hardly have incomes in their hand. If women have more incomes in their hand, they'd be more emancipated, they'd be able to take independent decisions. Without that, they cannot. It works against their emancipation. There are regional diversities regarding employment. The more advanced states generate more work and of better quality than the backward ones. So therefore, the disparities continue to grow. The latter fall behind, and they depend more on public sector jobs. Youth also expects public sector jobs. The public sector, which employs barely 4% of the workforce, cannot solve the problem of unemployment. Youth is asking for public sector jobs, but that's only 4% of the total. It's not the solution. But what do the young people do? This is the only thing that can get them a good job, so they're all going for it. Why is there little youth protest on lack of jobs? The lack of awareness of the wider issues among the youth is a direct consequence of the decline of the institutions of higher education. Because if learning is weak, your understanding is weak, you don't understand the wider causes of unemployment, and therefore the problem continues. And youth politicization has declined. Politicization gives you a larger understanding of society. So politicization of youth is very important. That has declined over the last 25, 30 years. Students are getting more and more alienated and trapped in social media and substance abuse. Many become open to believing in false dogmas. If your understanding is weak, if your scientific training is weak, then you believe in dogmas. If you believe in dogmas, unscientific tradition, and so on, then there's little hope of future. If the hope for the future is not there, then you think the past was glorious. So you're always trying to discover the past which was glorious. So you go back, you say, that was better than this. And all this opens us up to right-wing ideas. Now, there are a variety of reasons why all this is happening in society, and that links up to the data issues. So what are the data issues? Analysis of the employment situation in India is complicated by data-related issues and difficulties with definitions. So both data and definition are creating a confusion. Those working in the organized sector of the economy can be counted. So there are only 6%, 94% in the unorganized sector. They cannot be counted. They cannot be referred to every year. So it is this 94% in the unorganized sector where the data is patchy and therefore analysis suffers. Many people are working for a part of the day. If you go to a market, you find the rickshawala standing for 14 hours and getting 2 hours of work. You find the headload worker fellow sitting for 12 hours and finding only 2-3 hours of work. So there's gross underemployment. In India, we are not characterized by unemployment, we are characterized by underemployment and by disguised unemployment, as I'll come to. So, two factors lead to low figures in unemployment in India. If you look at the official figures of unemployment, they'll say 3%. If you look at the CMI definition, 8%. These are people who are looking for work and not finding work. But these are not figures of underemployment or of disguised unemployment. So, why is it so? There is no social security. So unlike in the advanced country, if you lose your job, you have social security. So you can afford to wait till you find a suitable job. In India, there's no social security, so you have to immediately go and do something. And if you immediately go and sit and sell chana, or you sell, say, some vegetable, or sell tea, you are going to be counted as employed. Okay? So this is residual employment. So people don't have work, people don't have, there's poverty, so therefore they have to do. So different agencies give different figures for what's called the labor force participation rate, LFPR, etc. So I'll not go into this confusing thing of LFPR, etc. But suffice to say that India has a very small percentage of people in the workforce, about 45-50%. Most of the big countries like Brazil, China, America have 70%. So in India, 15% less people are in the labor force. That means people have stopped looking for work as compared to the larger economies. And we have given data for this in our report. So India is therefore characterized by underemployment and disguised unemployment. What is disguised unemployment? People go and sit in the field, but there's no work. People go and sit in the shop, but there's no work. Okay? This is called disguised unemployment. So we are characterized by unemployment, disguised unemployment, by underemployment, and by people not looking for work at all because they have given up looking for work. So 4 different kinds of unemployment is there. And this is very confusing for the public. But the impact of this 4 kind of unemployment is that there's greater poverty. There's social waste because if people are not working, society is not getting contribution from them. And there's lower potential of output, which costs a lot as far as the economy is concerned. So the cost to the economy of unemployment is very high. Government of India itself is grossly understaffed. Per lakh of population, the number of judges, administrators, police, etc. is much smaller than most countries. We have only about 3.5–4% of the workforce in government. In most economies, it is 7–8%, and in the socialist kind of economies like in Sweden, etc., it can go up to 15–20%. So as compared to these economies, very few people are there in the government. So that's another cause of problem for us. Now, what does the government say to all this? He says, let's have growth. Okay? But the problem is growth will not solve the problem. You have to worry about the distribution of the growth. Who's benefiting and who's not benefiting from this? Where is the problem? The problem is in the small and micro sectors. The small sector and the micro sector of the economy is where the bulk of the employment is generated. But small and micro sector are now in the crisis. So the nature of growth matters. Government says growth first. It says expand the pie before dividing it. But the pie has been expanding but it's not getting divided because the distribution is not right. So this growth first is a self-serving slogan of the elite policy makers to justify their stance. Question is, for how long the marginalized have to wait for trickle down? Equitable growth can be faster than the current growth since demand problem will not keep manifesting itself. Now, as a result, we know government cannot create jobs. Government is only 4% of the total workforce. But it must create the conditions for employment generation in the private sector. And that is where the real problem is. So employment is a derived variable which is determined by other variables. What are the other variables? Demand in the economy. If there's lack of demand, production will be less and employment will be less. GDP growth, how much should the GDP growth be? It depends on that. Investment pattern, where is the investment taking place? In the organized sector, if it is taking place, it will not generate employment. If it's in the unorganized sector, it will generate employment. Technology, as I was saying, today even in agriculture, jobs are not being created because agriculture is getting mechanized, more harvester combines, more threshers, more tractors. So even agriculture is not generating jobs for the last 25 years because there's heavy mechanization there. So you need to take labor out of agriculture. Then public finance, what taxation do you use and where do you spend? That's another factor that affects. So entrepreneurship, that means the kind of education that you give. These are the factors that underlie. Then black economy undermines employment generation. So therefore, today, our problem is there are about 8 crore farmers, of which 85% are marginal or small farmers. They have a problem. There are 6,000 big units, 6 lakh small and medium units, and 6 crore micro units. So these 6 crore micro units and about 5.5 lakh small units, they have a problem. That is where the 97.5% of the employment is. And these people are facing a problem as a result. So what are the problems that these segments face? The problems of finance, marketing, and technology. They cannot get finance, they cannot get marketing, they cannot get technology. So this is where support needs to be provided by policy making. So in other words, if I identify, then first problem is employment is a residual. Investment is the focus, but not employment generation. So we invest and we don't care where employment is generated. Second is marketization, as I said. Marketization is weakening labor. That's become another problem. Third problem is growing inequality, and as a result of that, demand shortage in the economy. Fourth is rapidly changing technology, which prevents people from actually acquiring new skills. First, our education is weak. Then as jobs change, people have to learn very quickly to switch jobs. They can't do that because education is weak. So that's another factor that's there. Then black economy is large and persisting. Black economy results in policy failure. As Rajiv Gandhi popularized, when you send 1 rupee, so in the mid-70s, 80s, when the economy is growing at 3.5%, it could have grown at 8.5%. In the last 10 years, when the government 7%, it could have grown at 12%. So if you add 5% to the rate of growth, since the mid-70s, today the Indian economy would have been 8 times larger. So employment would have been more, and all of us would have had 8 times higher income. So the implication is, today the Indian economy would have been equal to the size of US economy if the black economy had not persisted. So this is the missed potential of development. This is the missed potential of employment. So black economy is a huge underlying feature that needs to be taken into account. And as Chidambaram said in the 2005 budget, he said, expenditures don't lead to outcome. So in the budget you allot funds, but the outcome is not there. That's policy failure, because the funds are misappropriated. Then we've had economic shocks. We had demonetization as a shock, then GST as a shock, and then we had the NBFC crisis. So 2016 was demonetization, 2017 was GST, 2018 was the NBFC crisis, and then 2020 was the pandemic. 4 shocks have been administered to the economy since 2016. These have all damaged the unorganized sector. We all saw during demonetization, businesses were closed, factories were closed, and especially the unorganized sector, because they didn't have working capital. Okay? GST has also impacted these. So the unorganized sector has been unambiguously hit hard by these factors. Then we are not spending enough on education and health and social sectors. And education and health are employment generating. If you have more funds, rather than in a school having 80 children, if you have 20 children, you will have 4 times more teachers. Okay? So expenditures on social sectors, that's education, health, etc., will make your children more productive, will bring entrepreneurship and give employment. We saw during the pandemic the crisis in health. In tier 2, tier 3 cities, there were no hospitals, there were no doctors. I did a survey of 25 districts of UP through Zoom. And there, these people are telling that earlier 1 person would die in a month. Now 1 person is dying every day. And there are no doctors, so the people have breathing problem and they die by evening. Okay? So that is the poor state of health in the country. And that is because we should be spending at least 6% of GDP on public education and 3% on public health. But we haven't crossed 3.8% on public education, and we haven't crossed 1.3% on public health. This is what Amartya Sen in a paper in 1986 wrote. He said, all the Southeast Asian economies in India, we started at the same level in 1947. They have pulled ahead. Why is India not pulled ahead? Because they spent a lot of money on social sectors, education, health. They have all children in school by 65. And India doesn't have all children in school even today because of 20 million child labor, which doesn't go to school. So we have failed in terms of education and health, which has brought down the productivity levels. That's why Southeast Asia pulled ahead. South Korea became a rich country by 1988. It crossed the threshold. We are far from the threshold of the rich countries. Okay? And that's because we haven't pursued the social sector policies that we should do. So, let me come to the place of the unorganized sector. I'm skipping a few sectors because, time is running out. The unorganized sector in the economy. The unorganized sector is also referred to as informal and unregistered. These terms refer to units that are not registered in the government's records. Sheila Bhalla in 2009 presented the definitional and methodological issues involved. The problem arises because the formal sector units also employ temporary and contract workers. So increasingly, the formal sector is not giving permanent employment, it's giving temporary employment. So the problem in Maruti, there's a big problem in Maruti for the last 12 years because now they're not employing permanent, they're only getting contract labor. Even in JNU, we have not employed permanent employees for the last 20 years. Now there are agencies which are providing cooks, darbans, and various other clerical jobs. Okay? And what we pay to the contracting agency is the full pay, but what is paid by them to the workers is half. Okay? So these contract employees have no social security. Okay? So even though they are employed in the formal sector, they're actually informal. So that's why I use the term unorganized rather than formal, informal. Because even the formal sector has contract labor. So the share of unorganized sector varies from sector to sector. Agriculture is almost entirely unorganized. There's hardly any organized sector there. Public sector is entirely organized sector. And every other sector has both components. So for instance, you have hotels and restaurants and you have dhabas. Okay? So dhabas are now unorganized, hotels and restaurants are this thing. You have airlines and you have rickshawala. Airlines are formal, rickshaws are informal and unorganized. Okay? So you have both kinds. The organized and the unorganized sectors are differentiated by technology. The technology that is used in the organized sector is different from the technology, and therefore productivity is much greater. And in a paper I showed that the productivity in the organized sector is 14 times the productivity in the unorganized sector. So there's a huge productivity differential, and that's why there's a huge wage differential. Okay, this is a paper I wrote which appeared in the Wire. If anybody is interested, they can look at it. And because the organized sector is highly capital intensive, it doesn't generate employment. The more organized sector you have, the less employment generation you will have in the economy. And the government is promoting the organized sector. It says we have to organize the unorganized. But you cannot organize the unorganized because the unorganized sector has an average employment of 1.7. How can a unit working with 1.7 people get organized? They can't do banking, they can't do marketing, they can't do technology development, etc. So therefore, this is only damaging. Now, as a result of all these changes that the government is bringing about, the unorganized sector is declining. The organized sector is rising. That's the K-shaped growth. Okay? But in our data, we are not counting this. We are not counting the decline. Why? Because as my next section shows, and I'll skip most of it because a bit technical, what is our GDP data based on? It's based on certain assumptions. First assumption is the production approach used for compiling the QGVA estimates is broadly based on benchmark indicator. We don't have the data, so we create benchmark. And using the benchmark, we find out what is the quarterly value added in that sector. That means we don't have data. We are only using the organized sector data to calculate the unorganized sector. Second is, in this method, for each of the industry groups, we compile the GVA, okay, by this benchmark method estimate. Third is, in general terms, quarterly estimates of gross value added are extrapolations of annual series of GVA. That means we extrapolate from the past to the future because we don't have the data. Now, if there's a shock in the economy, we cannot extrapolate. So after demonetization, we should not have extrapolated. After GST, we should not have extrapolated. After the pandemic, we should not have extrapolated, but we extrapolate. Therefore, we are not counting the unorganized sector. So in other words, this method, the problem is that a declining sector is proxied by a rising sector. the organized sector is rising, and we say we'll proxy the unorganized sector by this. So the decline of the unorganized sector is not calculated in the data. So in my articles, I've shown that even if we assume that the unorganized sector is declining by around 5%, then the real rate of growth of the economy is not 6.5%, but more like 2%. So the actual rate of growth is 2%, not 6.5%. So we haven't yet become the 5th largest economy, because after 2016, the demonetization, the GST have all hit the unorganized sector. So we are still the 9th largest economy, not the 5th largest. And at this rate of growth, we will not become the 3rd largest economy by 2027. We will still remain the 9th largest economy. So it is a misnomer, and the question is, why are people happy with it? Because we are only looking at the organized sector, where the desirable jobs are, and the multinationals are also looking at it. The FDI is also coming into that, and our taxes are collected from the organized sector. GST is not collected from the unorganized sector. So rise in GST is not a reflection of the rise of the economy. The government keeps saying GST is rising well, so our economy is growing. They keep saying our corporate tax collection is rising, so economy is doing well. Income tax collection is rising, but income tax, as you know, is paid by 1.1% of the population. Even though 9 crore individuals file a tax return, but as the Prime Minister said, only 15 million are effective taxpayers. 5 crore file nil return. That means they have no income on which tax is to be paid. Okay? So only 15 million are effective taxpayers, and these are the well-off from the organized sector. So bulk of the black income is generated in the organized sector, not the unorganized sector. Okay? So there are a lot of misnomers as a result. So the point I'm trying to make is that the data that's available is from the organized sector. The organized sector is rising, but the unorganized sector is declining. So we need to correct our data. So in other words, if the data is wrong, then we have invisibilized the unorganized sector in data. It's not contained in the data calculation. And even the quarterly data for the organized sector is based on 200 to 300 corporate sector companies. Because even the full corporate sector data is not available for every quarter. Only those companies which declare the results, their data is incorporated. So even the full organized sector data is not there in the quarterly data. So that is how much error we have in our this thing. So, in other words, I'll skip a few sections because I can see that time is running out. I wanted to say something more on the black economy and technology, but I think I've already said enough. Now, the question is, are there enough resources to give full employment? Because people say we don't have resources for full employment. So what we have shown is, in our report, that 332 million Indians have some kind of proper work. But 286 million Indians don't have proper work. So 332 million Indians have to support 1.4 billion population. That means each working and earning individual has to support 4.4 people. If these 286 million also had work, then 600 million would have had to support 1.4 billion. So each working individual would have had to support 2.2 individuals. So poverty would be less. Prosperity of the family would be more. So if more people are working, then there'd be more income. So therefore we have argued in our report that creating work is self-financing. If you give work to these 286 million people, GDP would rise by 16%, whereas the cost of giving work to these people would be only 6%. So you still have a surplus of 10%. So therefore we are saying full employment can be self-financing. In addition, we have shown in the report that resources are not short. If there's a resource shortage, it is for the consumerism of the rich. The poor are not consumerist. As the e-Shram portal data, during the pandemic, the Supreme Court castigated the government, saying how many unorganized sector people are there, you don't know. So they set up the e-Shram portal. On the e-Shram portal, the unorganized sector workers are registered. And the Prime Minister said 30 crore people have registered. And of these 30 crore, 94% have an income of less than 10,000 rupees per month, which is below the taxable limit, which is 1,20,000 per annum, right? Whereas your taxation begins now at 7 lakhs per annum, okay? So these people working at 10,000 rupees per month, right? These are the people who are in the unorganized sector. So we can easily create work if we pay what these people are getting, 10,000 rupees per month, okay? And that'll cost only 6% of the GDP to give the work. Their output would be 15, 16%, and therefore they'll be, they'll generate the resources that are required. Further, if we tackle the black economy, and we don't tackle the entire black economy, even if we tackle 30% of the black economy, we'll have enough resources for creating more employment. And finally, if we tackle direct taxes through wealth taxation, estate duty, and gift taxation, we'll have even more resources for employment generation. After all, the question to ask is, how come prosper economy like USA, which is highly technically advanced, creates enough employment for everybody? They need people from Mexico, India, etc., from Latin America to come there. In Europe, people are migrating from Iraq, from Africa, etc., because they have shortage of labor. Okay? So how come these economies, which are highly technologically advanced, how come they can create full employment, but we who are working at much lower level of technology, we don't generate employment? It's because of the system. It's because of the kind of problems that I've highlighted. So to conclude, it is not that India has made no progress since 1947. We made tremendous progress in every area, education, health, in industrialization, in everything. But we have lagged behind other countries that started at the same level in 1947. And we have huge problems. There's no other economy in the world which has such a large unorganized sector as India. No other country saw such mass migration from cities to rural areas as we saw during the pandemic. No other economy, neither China, nor Brazil, not South Africa, no other economy, okay? So it shows the crisis that India faces, which no other major economy in the world faces, okay? The unemployed are the losers and a victim of the prevailing system, and not because they're lazy or undeserving, as the gainers try to project to justify their own gains. The proposals of our report are segregated into those that can be implemented in the short run, medium run, and long run. We have to have policies so that in 5 years we can turn the economy around. So there are short run, medium run, and long run policies that we have suggested. Together, they will set into motion a paradigm shift in policies, but some immediate relief will have to be provided for the marginalized sections now. Increasing employment will result in greater production as well as an increase in demand. The shortage of resources for achieving full employment is an invalid argument. The shortage of resources is for the consumption of the rich, not for the consumption of the poor. What do the poor need? Education, health, drinking water, housing. All that is here. You're not going to import teachers, you're not going to import books, you're not going to import doctors, they're all here. Okay? So we don't have lack of resources for what the poor need. But we have lack of resources for what the rich consume, the big cars, the big color televisions, etc. Therefore, we are having a trade deficit of $80 billion with China. Because not only are we importing high technology items from China, like APIs for pharmaceuticals, like electronic components for our mobile phones, like automobile components and other power equipment, etc. We are also importing low technology items, like the manja for the patang, for the kites, like the pichkari for the Holi, the Diwali lights, the torches, the fans, they're all coming from China. Okay? So we have lagged behind in R&D. We are spending 0.7% of GDP on R&D. China spends 3% of GDP on R&D. And their economy is 5 times larger. So they have 20 times more R&D expenditure than India has. So they have become the manufacturing hub of the world. Because they're spending a lot on R&D. Their universities, which used to be very backward, are now in the top 10 universities in the world. Our university is in the top 200. So they have spent massively on education, on R&D, etc. because they realize that's the future. Globalization means the challenge of technology. Those who develop technology will go ahead. Those who don't develop technology will stay behind. So even though China is considered to be an enemy nation, we were trying to restrict imports, but we still have an $80 billion deficit with China. That's the extent of how far behind we are. So all this runs counter to the elite perception that full employment would be negative sum game. It is pointed out that 332 million workers have proper work, while 286 million are in one of the 4 states of unemployment mentioned herein. So if they get productive work, even at a low level of productivity, they can add 16% to the GDP, and the growth rate of the economy will rise. If a workable alternative to the present system imposed by international finance capital is worked out in India, it can be a model which other developing nations can also follow. So we can present an example to other developing nations as well. Achieving a more civilized and democratic society through moving towards full employment is feasible. And it's in the hands of the nation. It's in our hands. It will make for a more civilized society, and together we can fulfill this dream. Thank you for your patience.
The floor is now open for questions.
Good morning, sir. I have a couple questions for you. I'll start with the correlation you made about AI and unemployment. You also acknowledged the super change. Is it audible now? Yes. Okay. You also acknowledged the super change that we're witnessing right now and about the super intelligence taking over. And of course, there is tremendous uncertainty and fear surrounding this matter. So should we fear AI so much? Because I actually came across this podcast by a Harvard University, and they were talking about a metaphor. They mentioned a metaphor, a car metaphor. Just like a car has an accelerator and a brake. So if we apply right brakes in this context, it would be right regulations. You can actually harness AI to something promising. So what is your take on this? That is my first question. And also about ChatGPT, there has been a study that, and the finding of the study was that there has been improvement in the low-skilled labor force by use of ChatGPT than high-skilled. So as we are on the topic of role of regulators, you also mentioned the role of rulers in the beginning of the speech. Do you think that our government is doing enough to bring a permanent fix? Or do you think our government, the ruling party, is focusing more on temporary fixes, like band-aid fixes to just, for the purpose of elections, like direct cash transfers that nudge the unemployed, the marginalized, towards even more dependency than they are right now? Then you also talked about changing perception. You talked about how our concerns are changing, how equity is not our concern anymore. So do you think that this we don't care about ideology anymore? So the power of such direct cash transfers and such temporary problems is so much so that it can decide our future, that it is deciding who will be ruling us for 5 years. And also, you also talked about how unemployment is causing conflicts. You talked about how it is, just making us look into the back, into the past, and glorifying the past rather than looking forward. So, do you think that unemployment is the major cause of such, perpetuation of such dangerous politics or ideologies, and othering of a particular community? In any society, not just in India, do you think unemployment is such a root evil of such problems that makes desperate the marginalized to believe that the others are the reason for their misery and the scarcity of their resources, and not the inability of the whoever is at the helm? And also my final question is about you mentioned about the lack of data in unorganized sector and how the unorganized sector is not accounted in the calculation of GDP, and how the figures that we are boasting about, or that is being glorified so much, is inaccurate and misleading. Do you have any advices, or how do you think that we can formalize the unorganized sector? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. La-
Okay, so I think you've asked 7-8 questions, right? But I'm very happy because it means you've heard the talk well. Okay, you paid attention to it, and that's always a problem. You know, when you give a talk, people may or may not. People at times fall asleep also. You know, especially in these days of where people are sleep deprived. You know, people are on their mobile phones all night, Facebook, Instagram, etc. So it used to happen. I mean, I stopped teaching in 2015, but from 2012 onward, I could see some children dozing. And I'd say, so you didn't sleep at night? And they said, yeah, sir, we were, busy doing something. So I'd say, okay, go and sleep first, come back, and so you're very alert. That's a very positive thing. Now, the various questions that you asked, let me go one by one. Artificial intelligence is different from the technological change that has been taking place. Till now, technological change was replacing physical work. Like, in agriculture, you could use harvester combines, you could use tractors to displace bullock power or to cut the crop by hand, etc. Right? AI is changing the brain power. There's a complete difference. So people used to say that if you have typewriter and you go to computer, okay, that's better. Okay? Because word processing is better, it gives you more efficiency. But that still is a dumb machine. AI is not dumb. As Hariri has been pointing out for some time now, AI can lie. So it's thinking to get its work done, okay? We're not teaching it to lie, but it can lie. Not only that, as I said, ChatGPT-4 has absorbed all the digital knowledge that exists by now. That's why these are called large learning models, LLMs, right? So they have got the positive and the negative, both. So it's not going to give only positive answers, it's also going to give negative answers. And ChatGPT-5 will have something called Strawberry, which can self-correct. ChatGPT-4 cannot self-correct. So it'll work like the brain. And that's why the danger is a super intelligence has got created. This super intelligence will go ahead of where human beings are. Okay? And that's why even, you can make buildings using 3D printing now. You don't need masons, you don't need carpenters, etc. Okay? Using AI, you can do all these various things. Huh? So doctor's job, lawyer's job, architect's job, all these are likely to get displaced. So therefore, we have to think in a new way. We cannot think in the same old way. So it's not that we are Luddites against mechanization and so on. It's a completely new thing. And that's why the person who originated AI, he was in IBM, he resigned last year, and he's now campaigning against advancement of AI. He says, we don't know where AI is taking us. Let's halt the development of AI for some time till we understand its implications better. And last year, 2,000 scientists and technologists wrote a letter to the President of the USA saying, let us halt the development till we understand better where we are headed. So there are a large number of people who are sensing this. And as I said, Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near, in 2005, this Kurzweil book, that tells you how rapid the change is. As I said, it's exponential, and the exponent is also increasing exponentially. So those who understand maths know how rapid the change is, and therefore Kurzweil wrote a book 3 years back saying, singularity is here. That means we are already in the singularity, we can't go back. And the problem with capitalism is that for earning profit, Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, they'll keep competing and developing AI because they want to be the first. China will not stop developing it because they feel America is way ahead and America will damage them using AI. So every country will keep doing it. And that is what the danger is, that nobody will stop developing AI. AI is creating a super intelligence, and that super intelligence will actually overpower us. So just like for us there are ants and animals, for super intelligence we will be like ordinary beings, and it won't care about us. It could even eliminate human race, saying human race needs food, needs travel, etc. Why do we need all this wasteful expenditure? So it could eliminate. And today, as you know, all wars are being fought using AI. These drones that are programmed where to bomb, how to hit an individual, how to hit an individual tank, etc. So AI is already fighting wars. So it can create a war. It can create a war between China, Russia, America, West, by creating conditions, saying attack is coming, so you start firing nuclear missiles. Okay? So the dangers are there. And we have to be conversant with those dangers, that things can go really out of hand. So before we go further, there is something called the precautionary principle of life. The precautionary principle says, if we don't understand something, let us not venture there till we understand better. Okay? So the precautionary principle also applies there. Okay. So there is not only uncertainty resulting from AI, but there's also fear of the unknown. So let us get to know and let us get to understand. Chat GPT improving low skills, definitely. Teachers, task, but it will displace. And given that large number of Indians have very poor training, 95% Indian students have very poor training. They cannot graduate. It's only the 5% Indians. So it's creating a divide. Just like there's an internet divide, the AI will create a further divide. America is going way ahead. America will dominate. How did Britain dominate over such a small country, dominate the world? Because it was the first country to industrialize. It had the industrial power with which it could dominate. So as Tolstoy wrote, Taraknath Das asked Tolstoy to write a paper on India. And he wrote in 1908. And that paper is called The Letters. That was given to Gandhi. And Gandhi quotes that in the Hind Swaraj, right? So Tolstoy wrote saying, how could 20,000 people come and conquer 20 crore Indians? Okay. Because of the superior technology, the superior organization, they could make Indians fight each other. So he says Indians never resisted. So today we are not resisting, we are saying it will be positive, right? Whereas AI will keep marching. And America will still march over everybody. So it may be AI with America which will dominate the world. Because America is way ahead in artificial intelligence. China is trying to catch up. Today, more papers on AI are coming from China than even from the US. But still, all the big companies, they're putting $10 billion, $20 billion, $40 billion every year on AI. These Microsoft, these, Bezos and Elon Musk and so on, because they want to be the first. So there's competition. So development of AI will not stop unless the governments take action and say, let us wait. Let us pause till we understand AI better. If we don't understand and we do it, we are creating a huge problem. So government of India is definitely not doing enough. We are way behind in all this. So the fixes that you say, band-aid fixes, we're only just tinkering at the borders, We are not really into it in a big way, understanding things and so on. So ministries keep making pronouncements, but nothing much. You also talked about equity is not a concern. As I said, it cannot be with marketization. Equity also is not a concern because in the neoclassical economics, you talk about equity, but there is no way to achieve equity. You require what are called lump sum taxes, and lump sum taxes don't exist. So therefore we pay lip service, and then we forget it and we talk about allocative efficiency. So that's why equity is not a concern. And as I said, unemployment is causing conflict, and one of the ways that attention is diverted from this is by othering. Okay? You create the other and put the blame on the other. Okay? So this othering has become a very important thing in the last 20 years. Okay? And that's where the whole psychology and the philosophy is going. And regarding the data of the unorganized sector, which makes the GDP wrong, how do you correct for it? There's enough evidence. You look at the trade sector. After agriculture, the second biggest employer is trade sector. In trade sector, e-commerce is growing 20-30%. Okay? The normal trade is not growing because the normal economy is growing at only 2%. So at whose expense is it growing? It's growing at the expense of the neighborhood stores. So neighborhood stores are declining. Then there's evidence from textile sector, leather goods sector, luggage industry, FMCG sector that the big companies are growing. So the Parle G biscuit was growing where the local biscuits were declining. Okay. Similarly, in various other FMCG sectors, as the big roads and big highways are being created, more and more penetration to the rural area of the big industry. And therefore, the local production of soap, toothpaste, etc., that's declining. Okay? So you have enough evidence from all these different sectors that the unorganized sector is declining. So looking at the productivity differential, in my Wire article, I looked at the productivity differential, and using that, I said that the decline in the unorganized sector is between 5% and 9%. Okay? That means the unorganized sector is losing, since demonetization, about 12 lakh crores per annum. So instead of growing at 6%, it's declining at 5%. There's an 11% turnaround. And therefore, if they are losing, so in 8 years, they've lost 96 lakh crores. And what have you given them through freebies? 3 lakh crores per annum, so in 24 lakh crores. So they've lost about 70 lakh crores of income in the last 8 years. So the crisis is not being mitigated by the freebies. Freebies are only a response to the crisis that they face, where now public expects that they'll get freebies, okay? Because they face a crisis. So whatever little help they can get, they are happy with. Because public now doesn't believe the politicians, doesn't believe that in the long run there'll be development, because 75 years we've talked about trickle down, and trickle down has not benefited them much. So now they say, what will you give me in hand today? So I helped the Samajwadi Party and RLD and others with the manifesto drafting in 2019, etc. And we would make good policies and say, these are the long-term policies we should have. But then after that, they would say, what are we giving today in hand? Forget the long term. Today we have to promise. Okay? So therefore, you give cycles, you get laptops, you give this, that, etc. Otherwise, the public is not willing to believe you. So there's a political crisis. There's a social crisis. Okay? That's what I was trying to picture. So I have tried to bring all these factors in to show that the problem is multidimensional. It's not one or two or three things. It's coming from various sources. And therefore, we have to have a holistic vision, which is what Gandhi used to have. Gandhi made lots of mistakes. Let us not say that Gandhi did everything right. But in principles that he enunciated, he gave the right principles. So the mistakes were at the tactical level, but at the philosophical level, Gandhi said some of the things that would sustain life on this planet for a long time.
Kindly keep the questions brief.
So hi sir, earlier you mentioned that unemployment is still an issue in the country, and or you also mentioned that the negatives of the marketing, like marketing things, marketing is destroying the families and all. So my question is, if the companies don't marketize things, how will the company grow? And if the company grows, then only the more employment will be given to people, right?
Okay. Question is, who's growing? Now I'm answering. You see, if the organized sector grow, what we think of companies are these organized sector. These are only 6,000 units in the country. Okay? There are 6 lakh small and medium units and 6 crore micro units. It's the micro units and the small units that have 97% of the employment. Okay? That is what is set back. As I said, if you look at the FMCG sector, textile sector, leather goods sector, pressure cooker industry, etc., etc., you find the organized sector growing and the unorganized sector declining. But the organized sector is highly mechanized. To give you an example, I was talking to a worker from Maruti. He said 10 years back, there were 1 car coming out of the factory in 58 seconds. And on each car, 10 robots and 10 people are working. Now there are 20 robots and 5 people working, and one car is coming out in 38 seconds. So production has doubled, workers have become half. So growth of companies is not going to generate employment. It's the growth of the micro sector and the small sector that's going to generate employment. Okay? So therefore, whose growth, I ask the question. Not the big companies' growth. The government is saying that we'll organize the unorganized. But as I said, you cannot. The average employment in the micro sector is 1.7. How can the 1.7 employment of the micro sector become an organized sector? Can't do banking, can't do technology development, doesn't have finance, can't become. You can only kill it by having GST, by having demonetization, by doing digitization. Okay? So the point is the government is killing the unorganized sector and therefore killing employment and therefore creating unemployment. So you have to say whose growth. Now, organized sector has enough capital, so it can grow on its own. But the support is required for the unorganized sector. Instead, the government is providing to the organized sector and killing the unorganized sector. So they're doing the wrong priority. That's the point I was making.
Good afternoon, sir. So in the present scenario, a lot of youngsters are moving abroad for studies and settlement. So if this situation prevails for a few more years, how do you think the structure of employment will be affected in both organized as well as unorganized sector in the coming 10 to 20 years?
So, the percentage of the workers who are going abroad is very small compared to the total workforce entry. So as I said about, the government makes the mistake saying that the rate of growth of population has declined. But today, when we are counting in 2022, we have to count how many people are reaching the age of 15, 17, 19, and 22. Because then they'll finish their school, they finish their BSc, MSc, and then come to the workforce. Government is only looking at today's growth rate. And they're saying 6 to 8 million. We are saying no. Look at 15 years back, the population increase. Those are the people entering the workforce after doing 10th. Look at 17 years back, those are the people doing BA, BSc and entering the workforce. Look at 21 years back, those are the people doing MA, MSc and entering the workforce. Because ultimately they'll all come into the workforce. Okay? That gave us a figure of 27 million. Okay? That 27 million, you remove 25% women. Because women cannot always come to the workforce, marriage, childbearing, etc., etc. So we removed 25% of women, we got to the figure of 24.2 million. So we have to give the potential of 24.2 million jobs, for them. Out of this 24.2 million, maybe 500,000 are going abroad. Okay? So these are the people who would have otherwise entered the organized sector. But the organized sector jobs are not there. That's why they're going abroad. Or they're not able to enter the colleges and universities, good colleges and universities. So they're going abroad because their parents have the money to send them abroad. Right? But 500,000 will not solve the problem of 24.2 million. And with Trump coming, there's deglobalization. It is assured. Because he says, I'll put check on Mexico, on Canada, on India, on China. Okay? So fewer people will be able to go abroad. Canada has already stopped taking because of the problem between India and Canada. Otherwise, large number are going to Canada. Okay? Australia is still taking, but Britain and the US are going to hold back. So the problem will become more acute in India. And if Trump says, I'm going to throw out the illegal people who have entered USA, many more Indians will return. Already 2 plane loads of Indians have been sent back during Biden's time. Right? So the problem of the youth will increase dramatically as a result in the coming days. Okay? Because we are not generating enough jobs. Look at the budget. Budget is giving 11.11 lakh crore of capital expenditure. Okay? But where is it going? All capital intensive sectors. IT, power, highways, freight corridor. Now earlier on highway construction you would see hundreds of people working. Now see big bulldozers and big cranes and big tractors. So you see 10 people working. So direct employment generation in highways is not there. I was other day traveling on train from Gwalior back to Delhi. and I saw mechanical rail, laying. They're big machines laying the rail. There are hardly any people working. So even the railway tracks that you're laying are not going to generate much employment. And where do you generate employment? Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, education, health, rural development, agriculture. All of them are cut in the budget. So where the employment generation is taking place, the government is cutting back. Where the employment generation is not going to take place, there it's increasing expenditure. So therefore, employment will be a problem. Government has to change its policy. But government is hell-bent on organized sector. It has to take care of the unorganized. That's why the title of my talk is Invisibilization of the Unorganized Sector. Because in data it is invisibilized, in policy also it's invisibilized. If you keep saying economy is growing at 7%, you don't need to do anything special. But if the economy is growing at 1% or 2%, or in some cases it has declined, then there's a problem. And you can see the GDP problem. During demonetization, everybody saw businesses were closed, and yet the highest growth rate of that decade was during the demonetization year. That shows that when the economy was declining in the demonetization, right, it's showing 8% growth rate. So the error in GDP is at least 8%. That shows how much error there is in the GDP calculation.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, we have to wind up. Dr. Arun Kumar is at our college for another day tomorrow for further discussions as well. To appreciate and honor the presence of Dr. Arun Kumar at our college, we have a small token of love. Our former principal, Father Prashant, is here. We invite Father Prashant and our present principal to collectively present him with a memento. Biju, sir. Yes.
Thank you. I now invite Dr. Leslie Augustine, the College Staff Secretary, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Dear Homo economicus, it's a rare species we are finding Homo sapiens in and around right now today. Because we witnessed a Homo sapien talking about the rare things, very rare things, or putting the visibility of unorganized sectors, a top-down approach from how this unorganized sector in our country is going to impact in the social explosion, and it is going to be a daily issue for the India tomorrow, or right now it is actually, we are on that hot anvil. My dears, I can see a Saint Chavara sitting over here looking at the social issues right now, very seriously, Pandit Arun Kumar. So in 1800s, that guy, our saint, literally looked upon the issue, what was the getting to uncover the syllabus. That is a basic thing. We are not translating the information into knowledge, or we are not allowing the people to question or think about anything, and the wisdom is not generated. Literally, I'm also the part of this higher education system, and Sar is also the part of the higher education system of our country. We all are in literally in a dilemma, and at the same time, bit confusion. We need the antidote of wisdom. It's a very serious. So I hope these terms like disguised unemployment, unrecognized sectors, and marketization I never heard this kind of a talk from any person, because 2 months before I got the link of Neon show and I was listening to Dr. Arun Kumar 2 months ago, and almost many things I have heard from that show. One of my economics friend, I love economics. Even though I'm a biology teacher, I love economics, because if I'm teaching potato without the history, telling the history of Europe after a potato, and if I'm teaching opium without telling the history of Bengal famine and the opium war in China, that is actually not teaching. So thank you so much for coming over to this corner of Kerala and presenting this beautiful lecture in the memorial of our saint, or a social reformer, Chavara, alias Kuriakose alias Sajjan. Thank you so much from the bottom of heart, from whole Hartian family, and thank you so much, sir, for presenting this great lecture. In absentia, I would like to extend my thanks to our president manager, Joseph Kachapalli, and also to our principal, Biju CS, and Dr. CB, department head economics, for introducing the Pandit Arun Kumar. And thank you for the eminent personalities of Sacred Heart families, the retired staffs, and what I would say, more students should be there. More students should listen to this kind of a talk. We need more importance to this kind of lecture series. We have to invest specific time and specific slots more than any other activities in our college. I would suggest we will have to move with a very specific agenda for making this kind of lecture series more prominent in an academic institute. So thank you, everyone. I would like to say one word that, again, sir has triggered in my mind. Medha Patkar used to say that they ask sacrifice is need for development, but we ask whose development, whose sacrifice. So that is the last word, and I will say, let the wisdom be the antidote for all the confusions. Thank you, Hartians, and thank you, fellow beings. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Leslie, sir. As the session has wound up, kindly rise for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे